Recording in progress.
Recording in progress.
Can everybody hear okay? Is this working for y'all? Cool. Okay, I'm seeing a thumbs up. Thank you. So a lot of people are just walking in, but my name is Glenn Hendrick. I'm one of the co-directors of Alchemy Art Center. Our Artist in Residence program is a really great seasonal program that we run here, and we are excited to invite lots of fun artists from all over the country to come and live and teach at Alchemy. And we are so glad when people want to do an artist talk at the end. So thanks to the IMA Museum for having us in their space, and thanks to everybody for being here. And I'm going to go ahead and try and remember how to do this. And it looks like we're almost there. Okay. I'm going to invite Maren Lamb to present her.
Yay. Okay. Spoiler alert. Hi, everyone. I wish I could see your faces. Thank you to friends and family who are here. If you're here for Sophie, you can just meet me and come back later. At what time did we say?
So you're starting now 5:45, so 6:30.
At about 6:30. And I'm so happy to be here with folks in person and on Zoom, because this is a culmination of an awesome 2 months at Alchemy for me. And I've got my little iPad here so I can remember what to talk about. But as most of you know, I'm Maren Lamb, and for my artist talk, I'm going to start off with like a little bio, explain what drew me to printmaking, and then I'm going to talk about some of my current influences, so storybook illustrators and Gothic imagery, and then I'll tell you a little bit about my printmaking process. So let's dive right in, shall we? Oh yeah, is there? Oh, it's Fulton. Well, did you just want to do that to be funny? Okay. Okay, you're trying to observe Fulton. Fulton is both here in person and on Zoom. Oh, good. Oh, my face is on the Zoom. Everyone can see my beautiful face. Yay. Oh, Katie and Katie Collins is here. Wow. Wow. What a blessing. Hello to Katie Collier. So about me. My name is Maren Lamb, and I was born and raised in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And obviously that's the place where I'm from. It's very formative to me. And I think what was really special about growing up there is like having access to a lot of green space, and also like the sort of intricacies of the city landscape also really interested me. Like I went to elementary, like all of my schooling was like in the middle of the city of Philadelphia, but then like on the weekends it would be like going into the woods and stuff. So like both of those, like high city kid, high, romping through the woods kid, are definitely parts of me and influence me a lot. And as a kid, I like ever since I can remember, I was drawing. Here's a little picture of a drawing that I did that I think is so funny and cute in 2009. And I've been like a lifelong compulsive drawer. So what I mean by that is like any piece of paper that I have, like I'm just gonna start drawing on it. I feel like a lot of artists are that way, but like it really helped me concentrate in school actually, and I would get in trouble a lot because I would like draw all over my homework and stuff, and people couldn't read what I was like trying to say. And I would like draw in class and they'd be like, "You're not paying attention." I'd be like, "Yes, I was. It was helping." So like that's kind of what I'm working with, is like I didn't like come into art like, I don't know, some people like find it much later in life, but like this is like my earliest memories are of like drawing or like getting to paint and being really happy. So yeah,
Like
this
your
is just
reimagined thought bubble.
I know, the triangle. I know it is kind of like a fascinator. And this is like what I really have liked to draw like since forever is like just like girls. Like if I'm like have a piece of paper and I can draw whatever I want, I'm like, there's a face of a girl. And my parents know what I'm talking about. And yeah, so I think like as a child I was really interested in that. So moving on to, oh, I think I was supposed to talk about how I got a Bachelor of Arts in printmaking at Guilford College in Greensboro, North Carolina, under the tutelage of Katie Collier, who's on this Zoom. Shout out. And so I never did any printmaking before getting to college. And my freshman year, it was deep COVID, and I took a printmaking class like second semester, so classes could be off Zoom, and it was like mixed media printmaking, and that's what really got me into it. I was like, this is amazing. Just like being able to like make an instant mark in that way was like very fun. So we did like a lot of like, I don't know, like mono printing, printmaking techniques that are still really important to me today. And I find myself like these days really returning to childhood in my art making. And one of those things is like I think of printmaking as kind of like how I used to think of my childhood backyard. Like it wasn't like a super large backyard. It was like a nice lush backyard with like grass and a tree house and like cool bugs to look at, and my siblings and I would just spend like many hours every day. Like that's what we would do, is just go out in the backyard and like sit and like make fairy houses or like make soups or make potions. And just like the backyard is like this really small space, but it's like this like real entry point for like insane imagination and like really cool creations. And so I think of printmaking as like having a lot of limits, right? Like it's not like painting where you can sort of uh technically like make really small strokes and like completely paint over a new painting and start again. Like once you have the print on the paper, at least, like it's pretty hard to completely change the mark that you've already made. And it's working within like a very like there's very kind of strict boundaries for what you can do. Like you have to follow all the steps. There's a lot of cleanup. And I think in terms of like mark making, there's printmaking allows me to have freedom in that rigidity. Like I feel like there's like you're going to get like a flatter image a lot of the time. You're not going to get as much detail, but that's really helpful for me because it's like within those guidelines, which I need for my brain, then there's like all these cool endless possibilities. And I think like the boundaries of printmaking, like that you're supposed to make an addition of things, they're supposed to be really clean and repeatable, are like really fun to be pushed. And so yeah, it feels like a place to play and it feels very infinite. I also really am drawn to printmaking because historically it's been making images. Sorry, Katie Farr's entering the room. Katie Farr in the building. What was I saying? Printmaking has specifically meant to be like disseminated to everyone, right? Like it's made to be accessible, it's made to be legible. And I think like it's really important for me at least to make art that's like not super cerebral and like with a million layers of like stuff that you have to analyze. And I like to make images that people can relate to pretty easily. And so that's why I really like printmaking. Yeah. So now I'm going to go into some influences of mine, different artists that I think are super cool. And one thing that I'm super influenced by is just illustration, like children's book illustration. And I think like it's really interesting to think back on the images that were very impactful for me at like at an age where I really couldn't explain why they're impactful for me. So one of those artists is Myra Coleman. She is like an author of children's books and books for adults. But what I'm really drawn to in her work She wrote one of my favorite books about a dog who eats an encyclopedia. But her work is really has a lot of humor and fun in it, and it um, uh, rewards the viewers by looking closely. Like each of her like pages in a picture book aren't just like the words and then the image. It's like the words are inside of the image and there's like little symbols everywhere. And so I'm really drawn to art that you have to look close at. And I think she does a really good job of creating really interesting and bold color combinations. I'm someone who's really drawn to a lot of color. I want to put as much color on the page as possible. So yeah, I really grew up with a couple of her books that I thought were really hilarious. Another one is Margaret Boyd Graham, specifically this book, which is called The Meanest Squirrel I Ever Met. And and she also wrote, like, I don't know if anyone knows Harry the Dirty Dog, like he's a little white Scotty dog that everyone thinks is black. Great book. But this is like a lesser known book of hers that we for some reason had in our house when I was a kid. And the reason why I'm influenced by this is I find that I come back to the image of a squirrel like all the time in my work. And like when I was a baby, that was my nickname, is Fussy Squirrel, because I used to cry all the time. And I don't know why they put the squirrel in there. But I think that squirrels are like really like cute little tricksters, and they're really daring and like uh very funny and like kind of greedy, and I kind of like really admire their little personalities, and so I like drawing them. They're just like very active, so I really like drawing them, and I think this book is a great example of just like how funny squirrels can be. Like this little squirrel is having a nightmare about the meanest squirrel that he ever met. And I think like cuteness plays a lot in my work. Like I think uh uh I've always, when I was younger, when I was really little, when I tried to draw something, I wanted to draw like the cutest thing, like the cutest dog with like the most massive eyes or something. And I think that still plays a lot in my work. Like I just want to draw cute little things that make people smile. And yeah, this definitely made me smile. Like this little menu for Thanksgiving dinner, that's a bunch of acorn, or it's a bunch of nuts that are being paid for with acorns. That's really special. So yeah, this book is very special to me. And then also Carson Ellis, Pacific Northwest girly. She's originally from Canada, but she illustrated a lot of like the books that I was reading as a middle schooler or like late elementary schooler. And I'm very just in love with everything that she does, specifically how she's able to get like these super flat planes that then create like this landscape with a lot of depth. And these are watercolors. Yeah, she mostly works in watercolor, but she does like a ton of like she does like textiles, and I definitely recommend checking her out. I think she lives in Oregon right now. She's married to the lead singer of the Decemberists. But
It tracks.
yeah, it really tracks, right? And I also am really drawn to the way that she weaves like folk fantasy into her work. And like a lot of her picture books have like these super modern elements. Like you can see this like kind of graffiti in this like ancient stone house that is like very recognizable to me as like something that I would see in the city growing up. But then it's got like this fantasy ritual element, and that's what I find myself returning to in my work, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But anyway, she's great. And then finally, Faith Ringgold, who just passed away. Literally my favorite artist of ever. Faith Ringgold is like a multimedia artist. She like started doing some printmaking and then got super into making these quilt paintings. And she once again like really has a beautiful line of like putting a thread of fantasy through these like super urban landscapes. And so the image on the left is from her Tar Beach quilt series that she made into a children's book series later. And the same character was the star of like one of the first books that I remember reading, which is about the Underground Railroad, and like it imagines the Railroad before Colson White had like imagined it as an actual train, and it's about this little girl going through the Underground Railroad, and I find her images so captivating because number one of like how she's able to um like get this really like I don't know, the figures feel so flat, but like in delightful positions or something. And then just her maximalist approach to everything. Um, just like the way that she is like, it's not just a painting, it's also this quilt with like a ton of different fabrics. And she, like, when she picks out the fabrics for her quilt, also then paints onto each different swatch and changes the colors. And like that attention to detail is like so admirable. And yeah, I mean, stunning. RIP, like what else can I say? I can only begin to approximate something so beautiful. And then so that's like sort of a thread throughout my life. I think it's like my love for like illustration and these authors of children's books. And what I really like about children's art is again that it's like not trying to say something that you would have to like go through a bunch of layers to understand, but it's just trying to tell a story. And like from that one image, you should be able to get what the story is about because kids can't read a lot of the time. And it's the same with Gothic imagery. So I studied abroad in a small town in Spain my sophomore year of college, and that like super influenced the art that I make now because like pretty much every day I or like every week I would like go into a new church in that city and be like totally amazed by just like a small little chapel with like a tiny painting of people or like for this is a good example of like just like people painting over different paintings from many years past and like being okay with that, like that sort of layering decay of many centuries is really compelling to me. um and again like um whoa, losing my attention. Like again, like these sort of flat and statically posed figures I think really lend themselves well to printmaking and like the sort of printmaking that I like to do, and are images that were meant to be to tell like the biggest story ever of the Bible that everyone was supposed to know, and they had to disseminate it when most people couldn't read. So like I find these images really, really interesting and powerful because it feels like kind of trying to disseminate these everyday scenes into something like magical or telling this story that's like pretty whatever far-fetched for us today. Um uh but yeah, and sometimes they're pretty cute. So I definitely find myself returning to a lot of those images in my work today. And I think like growing up in like a family that was Catholic but not being Catholic myself, I was really fascinated by like going into church and seeing like these huge things of stained glass that like instantly cause reverence. You know what I mean? Like there's an instantly like an air of reverence towards that art, and like how do you get that reverence, how do you achieve that? So I don't know, that's something that I think a lot about. So for my senior thesis project, which was like the last big push of art that I did before I came to Alchemy, I was creating these woodcuts based directly off medieval compositions that were meant to sort of talk about and depict my experiences with depression using these um, like pretty simple scenes. And I think what classic religious images can mean for us today is like a number of things. Like twisting the image is like, for instance, like this image is like this sculpture is like really, really powerful, like kind of phallic, like man power moment against like someone who's like looks male presenting, obviously a demon, and then like twisting it into this woman, like what does that mean? So I'm like interested in uh like thinking about how we can recontextualize Catholic art and like how we can, I don't know, as people who are Catholic or come from Catholic culture, reclaim it in a way that's like not super gross, because a lot of it is like really um horrible and used to like subjugate a ton of populations. So that was what my project was about. And then it was also about like this really important thing to me. I don't know how the little line got on there. It must have been from the Zoom. That
Maybe zoom that line in.
did somebody zoom that line? Or maybe it was
Zoom
on the what?
Zoom phone.
What line?
You see this yellow line? That's actually not a the work. Yeah, no, or maybe it's just like on my presentation. Anyway, that's not the point of what I'm talking about. But in my current work, I'm really trying to blend that Catholic reverence and sort of the whimsy of childhood illustration to find like magic in everyday spaces. So going back to like my experience with urban spaces, a lot of my woodcuts have been like taking like an everyday scene, like this like street sign, which is like a pedestrian street sign, and twisting it a tiny bit to enhance like an everyday experience. So these are examples of two woodcuts that then through the plate monotype process, which I'll get into a little bit later, have created a piece of work that I think is like really interesting to look at, hopefully, and like has a lot of layers to it. Here's a couple other examples of just like images that I don't want to be like super high fantasy, but I want to be like a little bit weird and a little bit magical. So we got these geese with twining heads. It's like this actually, I did see this exact scene of like a garbage can filled with like flower, but they were like fake flowers. Someone threw away fake lilies, and I thought that was like kind of a really sad image. So I wanted to make it into a block. And then this last one is someone hiding in a bustle dress. Or maybe they're on the threads of the dress. So yeah, so not like wizards and like dragons and stuff, but just like ways in which like magic could enter kind of an everyday scene. So to get a little bit into like how I actually make a print, I really use my camera roll a lot. I like take pictures of like anything I think looks cool, and then like we'll go back through it and be like, well, for instance, for this print that I've started making, which is a reduction print, which means that I am carving away at one block with many colors, and at the end of the print, the block will only be like the outline of the colors. So I don't know. It's like the hardest thing to explain in printmaking, I feel like. But anyway, for this print, I like saw this image of this house. I don't even know where this house is in my camera roll. And I was like, that little crooked house is like so sweet and perfect. And like, what do I want to say about this house? I wonder who lives there. So then I start twisting the image, and I'm very interested in like how like smoke can be like kind of a veil into different worlds, or like a way to like see through something. So I wanted to add this like ghost or phantasmal figure in the smoke watching over this person in the house. So I'm like, cool, I've got that shape of the house. I'm just going to directly kind of transfer that. And then I add in my fantastical elements. Then I sketch it right onto the block. I transfer it onto the block, and I carve that block out. Then through a monoprint process, I really like to recontextualize my blocks using different colors, treatments with like different background patterns, and the like. So monoprinting is just the process of creating a print that will not have one that can be exactly like that. There's like a gajillion ways to do it, but the way that I like to do it is through plate monotype. So I take a piece of plexiglass and roll out a thin layer of ink on it. And then I can wipe away the ink into different patterns and designs. So you can see on this image on the right there, there's like some swooshes in the yellow background. That's just like me wiping away at the plate. Or I can use different things as stencils. So plants, doilies, paper, those are all things that I've used as stencils in the past. And there's like many other things you can use. But what I'm really interested in is like this kind of Joseph Albers-esque way of thinking about monoprinting, where it's like, how many different times can I make, like, can I print this woodcut or this lino cut and like it be different because of its treatment with color and texture? So this is an example from my senior thesis show of like the same block, like printed in 3 different ways. And that's been like super fun for me. Like I could do that for ages with like the same block forever and ever and ever. And yeah, I think it would be really interesting to do a show where it's like just one block, but it's like hundreds of different pieces. And hopefully they look different. And yeah, as I said before, like I'm someone who just like really leans into color, and I really like really bold and contrasting colors, and how it can create a mood, or how it can even create like a world and a scene. So this one in the middle, like I'm using the treatment of monoprints to create like this water, this person that's actually like floating on top of water. And that's just because I'm like reflecting the woodcut like over and over and over again. And then I'm like doing a layer of blue. And yeah, so all of these 3 works, which are from my senior thesis show, are like, I don't know, like 20 different layers of ink and blocks and all of that. Yeah, so that's like really when I'm getting into high gear, that's like what I love to do. And I'm super interested in like the contrast between really graphic shapes, like in this checkerboard, and then like within them, these soft shapes that can like move towards your eye, move back towards your eye. And like there's definitely, yeah, I just like hope that people look closer at my work, which is like a lot to ask in like a, you know, this like super high low attention age. Like I don't know, the isn't the data that like in a gallery like the average viewer spend like 8 seconds looking at your work, like maybe less. And yeah, I'm like trying to make something that like rewards you for looking closer. So yeah, here's some other monoprints that I've done here. I've gotten really into using cyanotype as a way to do monoprints. Cyanotypes in themselves are always going to be monoprints. You can't recreate them. But what I've had a lot of fun with as someone who like blue isn't enough. Like it's a wonderful blue, but I need some more, is just working back in with colored pencils. And I think like there's kind of like, I don't know if other printmakers here have experienced this, where it's like there's a stigma against like working into your prints with like different paints or like different like colored pencils or whatever, like anything other than like printmaking ink. It like devalues the fact that it's a print, but I think it really enhances it, and I've had a lot of good times with it. So to make these, it's like this is just like beach rocks that then I'm like enhancing the shadows and the lights with colors. And then on the left, that's like a lace doily. It's different pieces of transparent paper cut out so that they can like link together. And also colored pencil, some lichen too. So yeah, it's really fun to be able to create pieces that are like mixed media, but aren't like cutting and pasting onto, like this is all on paper, you know what I mean? And that's like really fun for me. Because it's like the surface is the same, but you can create so much dimension, and it feels like there's like stuff pasted on. Yeah. 20 minutes. Well, good thing we're almost done. So I'm nearing the end of my residency at Alchemy, and I've had a wonderful time thanks to all the lovely folks here. And I think there's a few things that I've learned throughout this residency that I'm going to take with me. Number one, that like I really want to lean into like the cuteness of things. I feel like I've gotten like, oh my God, that's so cute a lot. And it like makes me really happy. And I didn't realize because I feel like, uh, yeah, a lot of people are like, you want your art to be serious, you want your art to be profound or compelling. And I want my art to be some of those things. But like, what's so wrong with being really cute and like making someone smile? So yeah, just like really, really embracing that piece of like what I do and being like, oh yeah, like I actually do make cute art like most of the time has been really good. And and yeah, when I've not had access to like a press that I can make bigger work with, I've actually really missed that, which has been very interesting because at school, like my entire thesis, I was working on like pretty big pieces of paper and I was like really exhausted by having to work in that scale. But now that I don't have access to that, I'm like, what? Like it's like you're not able to manipulate as big of like monoprint things as I want to be able to. Like you have to cut up really tiny stencils. You have to like have really tiny like pieces of cloth and fabric, which is like totally fine. But what I'm finding is that I really like to just be like like use my whole hand to really move things around, which has been interesting. And being able to like if I want to use the printing press, like being able to move a block to the edges of the press. I don't know how to explain it, but like in a small press, you can print the block on the paper, but if you want to move it to the edges of the paper, then the block's off the edge of the press. And yeah, I've also felt really inspired by people who have been just not working with the press. The beginning of like me doing printmaking was also the beginning of me using a press, and like that was just what it was. But like seeing people doing really, really cool things not with the press, like shout out to Sarah. Sarah does a lot of really awesome block printing without the press. It makes me excited and interested to see what I do when I go abroad and I don't have access to that. So yeah, I'm gonna cut it there because I could keep talking forever. But thanks everyone. Does anyone have any questions? I also drew this. It's so cute. Thanks.
We've got many minutes for Q&A.
Yay.
Well,
Many minutes.
so,
Oh,
I just want to say that connection that you're making between like Gothic art and children's illustrations, and that like a whole story has to be told in like one frame or just in like visual stuff. Brilliant.
oh, thank you.
Like so true. Yeah, I just think that's like a really cool like seemingly really disparate things that have like something very important thematically or like conceptually in common.
Thank you.
Yeah, so very impressed with
Yeah.
that.
I like when I came back, I was like, why do I feel so compelled by this? Like, cause like, I don't know, like a lot of it is like super dark. Catholic imagery is like, there's so much blood. You like look at Protestant imagery and it's like, and Catholic, and it's like, oh, Jesus, he's so great. Catholic imagery is like, he was stabbed and he and everyone, and there's like a lot of, like, there's this one church I used to go to that literally has like a scene of just like a bunch of people getting their heads chopped off, like so medieval, but like, it's like an action. It's like one action of an image of everyone getting their heads chopped off. And it's so interesting. The highest drama point in the story.
Yeah.
And it's not that I like make super high drama stuff, but I do like want to be like, boom, like this is what I'm saying
Yeah.
in this one thing. And then I'll make it like 100 more times. I think another thing that I had to come to terms with, which I talked a lot with Katie about, is like Katie Collier, is like repeating an image. Like in our culture, we've decided if you have one really big image and it's not repeated, then it's really valuable because there's only one. And that means that it's really high impact. But it also can be that a bunch of the same image also is really high impact because you're like, whoa, why is that image repeated so much? That must mean something. And that's why printmaking can be really powerful, and that's why it's used for social movements and etc.
Man,
So, yeah.
Thank you for representing printmaking.
I love it. Okay, Casey, did you have?
I had a question about your medieval slide,
Yeah, hit me.
which was you clearly picked out these images, these textures, and I wanted to know what was it in these that drew you
Mhm.
and why.
I think a lot of what we just talked about, like this one, for instance, is like really high drama, like, ooh, what's coming out of the sky? And like, I really,
Yellow squiggle.
and first of all, the yellow squiggle is incredibly compelling. And not enough people are talking about all the yellow squiggles in medieval Catholic art. But yeah, like I think there's something about not only like high impact scenes, but also the way that people seem like they're holding the pose, like it seems like they're being posed for the image. Like although it's a high impact thing, or like they're in pain or something, like it's like they're standing still acting it. And so this one like really is interesting. Like you're acting like an angel with a scythe. Like why is that? Like why are you holding that position? And it's like these images have also held for like a gajillion years. Like these people have been like, if they were real people, they'd be holding them for so long. And it's like, why? Because of like these stories and these morals that like everyone wanted to disseminate. And I'm not saying that those stories and morals are the things that I want to disseminate, but I do think it's like interesting to think about. And yeah, then like this one in particular, I think is really indicative of like why it inspired the way that I monoprint. Like these different, like the far right one, the different layers of patterns and stuff kind of then I took and like was like that's really interesting, and that's how I did my monoprints. So like there's like doilies, but then there's also this pattern of the woodcuts, and then there's these different colors, like something about the idea that like this image, which is created by decay and like somebody being like, oh, this mural is ugly, I want to paint over this other mural. Like I kind of want to recreate that in this image, where like you're seeing through the layers of like time or something like that. Yeah, that's why I chose those, but I could have chose a bunch more. I was just like yeah. Any other question? Nico.
I think you used the word twist as one of the later stages of your process for developing an image, and I'm liking to notice how you're both twisting maybe the meaning of an image and also twisting the orientation of an image. I'd love to hear you say more about what you think you might be accomplishing when you twist an image, and especially whether twisting an image you've already created, reusing it in another, like maybe flipping or recycling an image you created another piece, can that give you new insight into the original?
Definitely for sure. So first question was, what do I do when I twist an image? I think like my thought process a lot of the time, like really simply, is like, this isn't interesting or compelling to me. Like I think this like there's something about like what's going on in this like clearly abandoned house that I was interested by. But if I make a print of that, like no one's gonna think the house is abandoned because it's like a flat woodcut or linoleum cut. So I want to create like a snapshot of a scene rather than like a picture of a house, if that makes sense. Or like I think it depends on the image, like what I'm trying to get out of this. Like this one, for instance, of like Saint James, I'm like, I the twisting of the image was like, what would my saint look like? Like what do I feel like is important to me, and like um what symbols would I have if I were a saint? And this one of, I can't remember which saint. It's someone slaying Satan. Is I wanted to change it in a way where people feel like it's more like happening now in the present day. It's like why there's like modern clothes and stuff. But also to change to like make a little bit of a commentary on uh like 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 the super masculine gender dynamic that is apparent in this like more traditional art, and like what that power then. I'm going to turn this iPad off, Sophie, so you still have power. What was I saying? What is the unseen impact of like that super masculine gender power, I guess. And yeah, I don't know if that answers your question. I think the like recontextualizing images through monoprints can have like totally differing results. And something that I noticed about my thesis is if like people didn't really look that closely at the blocks, because like I will use like really bright colors, they would be like, wow, I really like that. It's like so upbeat. And then I'd be like, the block is like really kind of sad. And so what I liked about that is then it's like masking this like this super sadness image. And that is like a part of my experiences with depression, like 1,000%. Like it was like yeah, it's just like you can like the fact that you can even like mask like the meaning of this like super clear image that I think is really clear just by like the treatment of the whole composition is like very interesting, and like was true. Like people would be like, whoa, I like that because it has purple or something, you know what I mean? And then you have like just the woodcut edition or whatever, and that has a completely different emotional impact. Yeah. I don't know if that answers your question.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. Yes.
What were your two symbols that you were holding?
Oh yeah. So this isn't necessarily me, but it's a person that's like me. It is like a burning branch, and then there's a sword. Yeah, this is like kind of a small image, and then there's a little squirrel. Of course. But the squirrel is actually me. It's a different- The squirrel's me. And then that's I'm the familiar of this person, and I'm the squirrel. No, there's another woodcut in this like series that I did for my thesis where the squirrel is like holding the sky. It's like holding a little star. Because I just think squirrels, like they just really take things, and I struggle to like take things. Does anyone have any questions about squirrels?
Have you missed having no squirrels on this island? Did you remark and notice?
I have,
that's a weird
although
thing.
I've been delighted by chipmunks. There aren't any here, but like in the East Coast, there are chipmunks, but they are not so up in the open like squirrels are. And yeah, and when I was in like Colorado and stuff, I was like, chipmunks, like awesome. But these are like basically the cousins of squirrels. So. Does anyone in the Zoom have any questions? I guess they could like put a thumbs up. Oh, there's chat questions maybe. I don't know how to see. Oh yeah, Ezra has a question. Let's see. Oh, we can't see anything if you are sharing. Oh no. Oh yeah, someone. Can I unmute people? Ask to unmute? Is that how I do it?
Yes.
Hey, Ezra.
Maren. So you were talking earlier about being inspired by illustrations and also like having to kind of downsize your work as you don't have access to the big press anymore. And that made me wonder, like, in the future, are you going to potentially like maybe think about delving into book arts?
It's a great question. I was talking to Coco, who's a past artist in residence, and she was like, I would love to illustrate books. Would you love to illustrate books? And I was like, nah, I would not love to illustrate books. And I think the reason why is because I don't necessarily feel like I need to tell a whole story from like beginning to end. And like that seems like what? Was there something happening? Oh, okay,
Yeah.
sorry. I would rather tell like a scene in the story and have people like kind of figure it out or like think about what might happen next. But I don't know, I'd probably like to try and make paper.
Yeah.
That would be
Also,
pretty cool.
Also, I would recommend looking into this one artist I like. I can send her. Her name's Edie Overturf. She doesn't like necessarily do books with like this clear narrative, and she kind of like has this very monotypy approach. And
Cool.
she'll just like have text or something, and then we'll get really into that. So maybe that could be something cool.
Well, if you like monotypy books, stick around for Sophie's talk because that's exactly what she does, and it's gonna be awesome. Thanks, Ezra. Yeah, send me the artist for real. Yeah, anyone else? Send a thumbs up, I guess. Or a person in real life. Or we can be done.
I got.
I know,
more-
I'm really interested in the computer people. Somebody's talking?
Yeah, I have
Oh.
more of a comment here.
Okay.
I've been watching this presentation with Katie here, and I particularly liked that image of the house. I thought that was really, really cool. And it's just very cool to see you and your expression, like of your experience, and just the level of talent that I just can't understand. Like, I don't know. This is a completely different world to me. So this has been really cool to listen to, and you are very missed on the East Coast.
Aw, love you, brother.
No.
Say hi to Sarah for me.
Oh, he's done. He quit.
Anyway, we can talk about that later. Any other questions? Kate Collier has a question. Sorry, Pat, you're next.
We also need to.
We need to wrap up. Okay.
Just a couple more minutes.
Two more minutes.
Not a question. I just wanted to say that I'm excited about your cutesy route.
Thank you.
Yeah, much support. And your
Appreciate it.
monotypes are beautiful. You made those at Alchemy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Good job. Okay, bye.
Goodbye.
My comment was just that they also have the kind of aspect of like tarot cards.
Mm-hmm.
From like the arcades, that they have a lot going on. You're worried about little tiny details. It's all this like imagery that you're like, I don't know what this means, but there's like maybe in my life meaning to this. So in that way, you can like
Definitely.
some people are slow, like.
Definitely. And what's interesting about tarot cards is like everyone agrees on what each individual symbol means. And that's really cool. And I would love to do a tarot deck. That would be awesome.
Tarot deck. I'm gonna buy your tarot deck.
Okay.
Super cute tarot deck.
Yeah.
Okay, super cute tarot deck is happening. All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening.
I'm gonna switch right into Sophie.
Oh, I should have moved.
Thanks for being here. Hey, Katie.
Glenn, I love you.
We're gonna switch over to Sophie, and I don't know if I believe that the yellow little swoop appeared at some point, and if anybody knows what that is or how to get rid of it, I don't think that's on our end. I think that might be on a participant's end.
It is, but my
I
kids.
think there's a new thing where you can mark up, and I think you can erase it, but I've never done it, so I'm scared to try it.
I'm scared to do it too, and I don't know how to do it. Okay, okay, well,
It's fine.
if the,
Spaghetti on the wall.
okay. I'm gonna go ahead and switch to Sophie's talk here.
Saying stupid.
Oh, that's what I should read.
It's all my different states.
All right, okay, thanks so much, everybody on the East Coast for staying up late. Without further ado, our second speaker of the night, Sophie Stratyner, is taking the stage. Yes. Yes, absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, we're gonna exit out of this just quickly. I think that's a great idea. Okay, so we're gonna just make sure we're lined up. Okay, so you go in there.
Okay, hi. Okay, perfect.
Yeah, I think that was a great idea.
Okay, so then can I just jump over here and
And then you just go into that, and then you go into the other, and the spin, and then one.
okay. Okay, great. Well, hi, I'm Sophie Stratyner. Shout out to Maren for an awesome talk and awesome art. And yeah, shout out to Alchemy Art Center for hosting us this summer. It's been so awesome. So cool. So I am a textile artist. I'm a natural dyer. I'd like to think of myself as a poet. I'd like to think of myself as a photographer. All of these things. We can be all of these things. So yeah, so I am gonna just jump into it. I want to talk a little bit first about kind of my like earlier work in this world. I went to college for costume design. So I was really passionate about theater as a kid. And chose that as my field of study to hope to have a career. I think costume design has definitely influenced a lot of my art making for sure. So these are just some of the examples of different projects that we did in school. I went to Pace University in New York City. Kind of chose to go to New York as sort of a mecca of theater and a place to pursue costume design. So these are just some various images from that time. My kind of my sort of like hallmark when I was in college was a production I did my junior year called Peter and the Starcatcher. It's sort of a riff on Peter Pan. It was on Broadway at some point in like 2011 or something like that. But it's kind of a show that has an ensemble that steps into playing a bunch of different characters at certain points. So going into creating a costume design for that, it was all about having a cohesive ensemble, these actors that could jump into playing different roles. The show kind of loosely takes place in like the 1800s, and the original Broadway costume design kind of was a modernist take on the 1800s. I kind of went a different route with that, and I was like 20 years old living in New York City, and I wanted to kind of dress the people in my show like the people that were around me on the street. So I kind of chose to do more of like a streetwear approach while still maintaining this like fantastical ensemble feeling. Part of the show is that there is this like dance number that opens the second act where they're all mermaids. So we made trash mermaid costumes. So in this bottom right corner are some of the examples of the trash mermaid headpieces. These are some more, so in the bottom right corner, again, there's kind of another look at the trash mermaid costumes. And in this upper right corner here is kind of the queen mermaid that enters at a certain point in the show, made entirely out of upcycled trash materials. Like a blue painter's tarp was the base for that gown. And then I collected dry cleaning bags from a production that I was working on the wardrobe crew for, and I saved those bags and painted some of them and turned them into the skirt that she is wearing. So part of my work has always been finding objects and transforming them, specifically fabric. So that's something that we'll see a little bit later with my current work. This is just another honorable mention. I did a bunch of costume design things in high school, but just another honorable mention for me was this play called A Lie of the Mind by Sam Shepard. takes place in like 1989, or I forget the exact year, kind of just like a dark family drama, very in line with Sam Shepard's other work, if any of y'all are aware of him. He's a playwright. But yeah, so there's just some honorable mentions from my time doing costume design in school. When I graduated, I actually found myself more drawn to working in costume production. I was lucky enough to spend 2 years working for the Public Theater in their costume shop, working as a costume crafts artisan. So that job basically entailed all of the things that were not stitching in the costume shop. So we did a lot of custom dyeing, custom paint treatments, anything that was related to like jewelry, headpiece making, all of that stuff, all fell under our umbrella. At this point, when I entered into this job, despite my school was very design focused program, so I was entirely self-taught in the realm of costume crafts. But I had actually in 2019 also done an internship with the Public Theater's costume shop, and that was where I really learned how to dye. And now that is a huge part of my current artistic practice. But so here is just a couple of pictures from Shakespeare in the Park, 2022. Richard III, starring Denai Guerrera. She's moderately famous, no big deal. But so I did a lot of custom painting and custom distressing for that show. So garments come in to us brand new or having just been made brand new by the costume shop. And it was our job as the costume crafts artisans, me and my fellow coworker. It was our job to make things look old, make things look like they had been in battle, make things look like they were being worn by spooky ghosts. And this show also, we basically designed and created the jewelry for the entire show. So the gold medieval necklace, the thicker chain, as well as the boar that Denai is wearing here as Richard III, were made by yours truly. Out of bits and baubles, we spent a lot of time shopping in the garment district in New York that summer and finding all of these beautiful medieval rhinestones and attaching them together, as well as custom paint treatments, custom dye treatments. The picture on the far right of the screen is for one of the ghosts. There's like some ghost children that appear in Richard III. Crazy play. If you're not familiar with it, you should read it. Look at him, Pat, because he loves Shakespeare, our fellow Shakespearean. During my time working at the Public, I got to work on, I think I worked on like 10 different shows. These are just some honorable mentions. A piece that I really, really loved getting to be a part of was A Raisin in the Sun. For that show, a lot of fabric was purchased new, and I worked with the costume designer to, I was the sole crafts artisan on that show, and I worked with the costume designer to dye the fabric in certain ways to be able to dull it down, make it look like these clothes were older. So like you could see the dress that the actress is wearing in the center photo came to me as a brightly colored floral, and we dyed it to create a custom color palette for the show, which was really exciting. And you can also see in the picture on the far right, a jacket that came to me as solid black, and we did some color remover and then layered on some new dyes and new paints to create a custom jacket. Something a lot of people don't realize about costume design is that a lot of pieces are being purchased from stores. So this is just a Dickies jacket, probably was purchased on the internet, and using the skills of a costume crafts artisan, we can make custom things for these shows. The picture on the left was a dress that I dyed using synthetic dyes, using an ice dyeing technique. And then applied gold leaf to the bottom, as well as all these fun little butterflies that are on there. And it's a little hard to see. Yeah. And it's a little hard to see, but the bottom picture is a custom paint treatment that I did as well on the jacket being worn, the jacket and pants being worn. So I really love being able to make something totally new, and that was really why I fell in love with theater. I've chosen right now at this point in my life to kind of take a step back from theater, focusing more on my own artistic vision. I do think someday I will return to the world of costume design and theater, but such is the ebbs and flows of life, right? So, yeah, so this is a little out of chronological order. I'm jumping back. This was all from 2022 and 2023. But I'm jumping back now to I graduated college in 2020 with a fresh degree in costume design, and every Broadway and off-Broadway theater house closed indefinitely. So not really knowing what to do with myself and kind of just wanting to get out of the city. I ended up living and working on a communal farm in upstate New York called Magic Forest Farm. I already had a growing interest at this point in time in natural dyeing. I had done some experiments in my apartment at the very beginning of the pandemic with natural dyeing, but being in this beautiful natural location and having a lot of time on my hands, that was where I really dove into my natural dyeing practice. That is still really what I work with today. I taught myself eco printing while they're on the farm. So these top images here are some 35mm photos I took while I was there. And then the bottom images show natural dyeing that took place over the course of 2020 and 2021. I was super interested in working with foraged leaves. In the fall in upstate New York, there are abundant staghorn sumac trees. Staghorn sumac feels like my spirit plant, honestly, like my soul connection plant, because it really, staghorn sumac taught me how to natural dye. It's a plant that's rich in tannins. And those natural tannins, when combined with iron, make really beautiful eco prints. You can see the middle photo here of my friend Skylar, and the photo that's right to the right of that are from that period while I was at Magic Forest Farm, working with these sumac leaves, using the sumac, the tannin from the sumac, as well as their leaves to create these eco printed designs. So that was, and here's just some more examples from that like era. When I went back to the city, everything was still shut down. And I was like, what do I do? And I just hung out in my room all day, natural dyeing. This image on the right is actually a costume piece that I created for two friends of mine that were doing a dance, created like a short dance film. So they reached out to me and asked me to make them these dresses. So the dresses were upcycled bed sheets that I naturally dyed and then made into these dresses. And we worked really close together, having like a process of fittings, really channeling my costume design education there in that moment. And I think this was the point. I kind of want to go out of order with this real quick, but maybe yeah, okay. So this was the point in which I started really this is the point in which I started making and selling clothing, which is still a huge part of my practice today. I call my unofficial official brand Total Dive. It's all the pieces are upcycled, thrifted pieces, hand dyed, one of a kind, utilizing different all the pictures here are naturally dyed garments. I also work with fiber reactive dyes. I utilize different applique techniques, different tie dyeing techniques, and different block printing techniques to make these garments that I still sell today. In 2021, when I was kind of still stuck in my apartment, that was when I really began this journey. Yeah, okay, I'm gonna come back to that other one. Sorry, I jumped out of order there. Just kind of wanted to get to that. So in 2021, after having this experience of living on the farm in upstate New York, I decided that I was going to move out of my apartment and move all of my belongings into my friend Naz and Jules's basement. They're on here, so hi to them. And they lived in an apartment in Baltimore at the time. And the rest of my belongings, everything that I could fit in my car, went into this SUV. And I hit the road and decided I was gonna make art, farm, and follow my dream and be not in the city for a little while. So I spent most of that summer of 2021 in Western North Carolina. Um, Shout out Maren. Yeah. Maren and I have bonded about Western North Carolina. For sure. Such a beautiful place. It still has like a lot of my heart. During that time, just kind of like living in places honestly very similar to Alchemy. I just one day had collected all of these naturally dyed fabrics and a bunch of objects from hiking and exploring the mountains, such as this moth wing that you see pictured here, as well as different bits of snake skin. And I just felt like I wanted to make a little zine. It sort of just happened. And the rest is history. So this was my first fabric book. These soft fabric books have now become an integral part of my art making practice. I've made 2 fabric books while here in residency at Alchemy, as well as teaching a soft book class to adults, and in my youth mentorship with middle schoolers that live here on the island, I've also gotten them to channel their creations into the medium of a soft fabric book. So this is the first one I made. It was called Here. It was fabric that was dyed with jewel weed, fabric that was dyed with various tannins, fabric that was dyed with madder. This print in this image here is like a little like half nutshell that I found on the ground and tried to make little prints out of. And then at this point in time, I also was fortunate enough that I started working with a gallery in the River Arts District in Asheville, North Carolina. And during that summer, I worked with the woman who ran a studio there. And she rented out a wall to me, and I was able to display things and sell some pieces. So these 2 pieces that you see here, like, were on display in her gallery in the Riverside Arts District in Asheville. So this piece over here is kind of a deconstructed book, and the piece was called Sammy Said. And these pieces, that also incorporates found objects. Some of these bits that you see kind of folded and embroidered here were found plastic scraps from Asheville. Then that summer, I went to work on several different farms around the Western North Carolina area. This was another book that I made while living on a more remote farm. This book was just really heavily inspired by my time living in New York City as a young person, as my work still is inspired today. I love to incorporate writing. These books really are kind of like mono prints, as Maren said. This one is a total one-off. I just wrote inside the book with a pen, but it's all on naturally dyed fabric. And I like to think that the colors of the fabric and the textures of the fabric also inform the words. I am really drawn to making these soft fabric books. I feel like it's a very intimate experience of being able to hold this art object in your hand, and look at it and touch it and feel it. I love textiles because I love being able to touch them. I love the softness of textiles. I love clothing. I love how we dress ourselves. And so I love being able to take the feeling of dressing something and dressing a story or an idea through making a soft fabric book. This is just kind of a smattering of some other ones that I've made. I have not always historically been really great at documenting these. So these are just some other examples of books that I've made, vending at an art market in Brooklyn. But the only books that were for sale were the ones that you see at the front of the picture, the 3 little pink ones. So I've experimented in time with making editions of these books so that people can buy them and take them home. But they just have to be really like pared down in order to be made into editions, or else I would be killing myself making all of them. So these are some other books that I've made. Hopefully these links will work. So some videos that I have of some books. Sorry, it's like an Instagram video. So this is a book that I actually made at the end of that summer. I did crash my SUV, and that was really influential into just how the rest of my life has gone pretty much. I ended up going back to New York City just because it was a place where I could live without a vehicle. And I made this book while living in Brooklyn about my experience of leaving and then returning. The book is made on the base pages for the book were dyed with indigo from one of the farms in North Carolina. There was a woman that was growing indigo. And then the yellow pages are marigold and other flowers, as well as found iron objects, bundle dyed to create the textures, and then ink on top. And the poem was written by me. Yeah, about that experience.
Great color relationship.
Thank you. The noise of a windy Brooklyn day. What it is to return. Can you allow return? So that was about the experience of me having to cut my travels short. But life does come full circle as I am once more living on the road 3 years later. So that was that one. Let's see if we can go back. Okay, let me get back to my presentation. Here we go. Okay, so I'll just click here. This is another video. So this is a very literal interpretation of a scrapbook, but also kind of a figurative interpretation because it's a soft book that's not a scrapbook at all. But after doing natural dyeing for a couple of years, I had amassed a large collection of scraps. So I used hand quilting techniques to put all of my scraps together in an accordion fold style book. So the way this book was constructed was that I sewed all of the scraps onto one very long, skinny rectangle, and then folded it into an accordion and bound one edge, and then put a cover around it. So these are all different naturally dyed fabric scraps. There's a story behind each one of these scraps. Some of the stories have lost me, but right when I made this book in January of 2022, I could have told you where each one of those pieces of fabric came from. And probably if I was holding it in my hands, I probably could tell you again now too, but it's in a storage unit in Brooklyn. Now I'm taking us to Instagram home.
Yeah, let's just go through your Instagram.
I don't think that's my Instagram. That's somebody else's Instagram.
Oh, what?
So this it's probably Glenn's because it's a Glenn's computer. So this was a book that I made in the fall of 2023. This book explores a natural dyeing method that is really integral to my natural dyeing practice, which is the relationship between tannin, which is a naturally occurring enzyme in a lot of plants, and iron, which you can harness iron in its pure mineral form in a couple different ways. And when they are mixed together, it creates a darkening effect to any natural dyes. So with tannin specifically, you can use it to create different tones of blue, gray, and black. So here I'm working with foraged acorns from the streets of Brooklyn. It's really easy to be in like the beautiful woods of upstate New York and be like, I'm foraging. But then when you go back to Brooklyn, I challenged myself to find ways that I could still forage while living in the city. So I found acorns that just had like fallen from a baby tree. And I would collect found rusty objects, such as little washers. I think this pattern on this center page here was actually created using a chain. I remember I pulled the chain off of like an old abandoned bike nearby where my friends used to live in Baltimore. And I think that was how I made this print. And the words were printed using a pochoir stenciling technique, which we covered in my soft book making class, which is a cut paper stencil making technique. So this book I actually was able to make multiple editions of. I think it was an edition of 5, and I sold all of them and kept one for myself, of course. I have a whole soft book library that I love to refer to. So this book is really about the relationship between iron and tannin on fabric, but on a more metaphorical level, it is also about making something that is hard and insoluble, soft, textural, and a piece of fabric. And the way that you can do that to your own spirit if you wanted to, or you could do the opposite of it to your own spirit. But either way, it can connect to the personal as well as to the artistic and technical. The exploration of a technical idea can also be quite artistic. Last summer, I did a residency at Pillow Fort Art Center in Andes, New York. While I was there, I utilized only plants from their property in the Western Catskills to naturally dye a bunch of fabric. And then I compiled that fabric with journal entries from written from the time around my residency to create this soft book. This was my largest soft book to date. When closed, the book is about a foot by like 10 inches. So when open, it's pretty large. Actually donated this book to Pillow Fort and it lives at their house. Tyler and Glenna are amazing people who are running that residency. And the book now lives there for all residents to be able to experience. So I have a couple different in this book I also utilize all kinds of different quilting and hand sewing techniques. I'm really into layering of different textures. There are also some found objects in here. This shiny bit that's down here in the left corner is a piece of painted plastic, kind of a reference way back to the beginning of the presentation to my painted plastic mermaid dress. So I've always been really interested in trash and upcycled objects and figuring out how we can use those to create beautiful works of art. So that is this book. This is another page from the book, utilizing quilted fabrics, hand sewing, beads. This is also a piece of paper. This is when you're eco printing. I oftentimes will lay down, I'll hoard paper grocery store bags. And then I lay them down when I'm doing the printing to act as a barrier so that my prints come out clearer and don't overlap upon themselves. And I oftentimes will save those pieces of paper because they're really beautiful. And in this case, I incorporated that into the book. This is another page from the book. These are eco-printed maple leaves that were cut out and appliqued onto their reverse image. When I do eco-printing, it's a little hard to explain without going into my entire eco-printing class, which I also taught here at Alchemy Arts Center. So it's a little hard to explain the whole process without going too in depth, but the method that I use, I can basically create a reverse image of the leaves. I take two different pieces of fabric that have both been dyed with different tannins, and I dip one in iron and I sandwich leaves between the two pieces of fabric, and I can create resist prints that way. So this lighter piece of fabric was the sort of inverse image of the piece of fabric where these maple leaf imprints came from. So if you look closely, you can see the image of the maple leaves right there. And I was using a teeny tiny stamp set to individually put each one of these letters down. And it took forever, but it was a labor of love. And so back again to my clothing practice. This is all of my soft books for now, but I do have two soft books that were created that I'm about to get to in a few minutes that I created during my time here at Alchemy. This is a part of my, sometimes I'll do sort of specific clothing collections, like this purple shirt and the pink dress were both part of a Valentine's Day collection that I did. And then this was a collection in which I started to incorporate screen printing and photography into my work. So the photography is something that has become a lot more important to me just within the past year that I am trying to incorporate more into my work. You'll see more of that in a few minutes. But these were two pieces from a collection that I called Dreamscapes, in which I utilized this screen of these hands reaching for each other and this unicorn. And these were original 35mm photos that I took in upstate New York. And so this gray shirt was dyed with foraged acorn tannin, iron, and madder root. And then this shirt at the bottom here was dyed with fiber reactive dyes, which is a synthetic dye, but I think it has its own sustainability characteristics. I mean, I think natural dyes kind of become a bit of a buzzword. You hear natural dye and you're like, well, that's sustainability. But natural dyeing is quite energy intensive and water intensive. Not to talk down on natural dyeing because it's my true love. But fiber reactive dyeing has become really important to me too, because I use a low immersion dye technique. So I can use just about like an inch of water and create all these different colors and textures. So I think that it is sustainable in its own right in that regard. It's my cousin. So jumping ahead now to this year. So in fall of 2023, a series of unfortunate events caused me to leave New York City. But sort of a knight in shining armor appeared and said, "Do you want to move into this van with me?" And so since October of 2023, me and my partner, who is right here in the room, have been traveling the country and living out of his Sprinter van. And so that's been a really cool journey. I've seen more of the country than I ever thought I would. I've been documenting our trip on my 35 millimeter. And so these are just a couple of photos. Things that I've been really drawn to artistically during this time. Human impact on the environment, the ways in which we specifically as Americans sort of relate to the natural world, highways as sort of the like veins and blood and just highways as the thing that provides life to our country. We've traveled the country now on these highways. On so many different interstates and county highways and state highways all over this country. So I've been trying to document that experience. Like this image on the bottom right was taken in Austin, Texas, visiting my friend Leah, who lives down there. And we naturally dyed a bunch of pieces together. And then we wanted to take them to go rinse them off. So we went down to this river, the Colorado River, where it runs through Austin, is a totally urban environment. But that same Colorado River runs through the Grand Canyon, runs through like Mexico, and looks different the whole way. So the way in which humans in Austin have built that to be what it is today. So these photos have become a huge part of my work. So this is a piece that I made this year. I quilted it earlier this year, and then I put the finishing touches on it here at Alchemy. Colton and I, my partner, we spent our winter sort of accidentally in West Texas. We went down there to work on an earth building project, and then the van broke down. And it really was difficult to find the parts that we needed to fix it. So we ended up living there from January to April, kind of on an accident. But things happen in beautiful ways. We totally fell in love with the region, and we're hoping to spend our winter again. We're hoping to spend our winter there this year as well. So this was a quilt that I made inspired by being in the Big Bend region, right outside of Big Bend National Park in West Texas. These are eco prints and naturally dyed textiles that I made while we were living down there. We were working in a restaurant. One day my manager was going through her closet and throwing away a bunch of clothes. So I took a lot of her old clothes and I cut them up and I used them in this quilt. Stuff that just was never going to be worn ever again, because she was one of those people that like buys a lot of fast fashion and then just kind of like wears it once. And I was like, well, I'm not going to wear this, but I will make it into a quilt. So this quilt incorporated all kinds of different improv quilting techniques, as well as hand embroidery, just collaging fabric together. And I really wanted to make it sort of an abstract shape to kind of defy what we think of traditionally as a quilt.
What's
This-
the size?
Oh, this is big. It's about 4 feet. I would say it's about 4 feet by 4 feet. You guys will see it this Thursday hanging on the wall. This photo was taken this morning in the dome.
Wow, looks really
Good, clean picture.
Yeah. So this is another piece. Something that's been really on my mind has been kind of our modern day monuments, thinking again more deeply about highways and how important highways are to modern American culture. And thinking of the image of the pillars that hold up the highways. So this was a quilt. This was actually these pink pictures that you see here are naturally dyed with cochineal. I used different mordants to create different colors from one dye. So they were mordanted with the image. I painted the image on there with the mordants and then just dyed it once in cochineal, which is a little beetle. And all these different tones come out on the picture. So the cochineal was foraged by my friend Leah in Austin, Texas, died at her studio in Austin. And these images were of pylons, highway pylons, that I took photos of when we were driving from Houston to Austin. So I'm really into the idea of place-based art. Like this quilt to me is like my Big Bend quilt. This is like a piece that comes right from Texas for me as well. And probably in a few months, there might be a San Juan Island quilt. It doesn't exist yet, but there's some fabric and there could be a San Juan Island quilt. So when I was making this piece, I was also really thinking about family heirlooms, the legacy of quilts. Quilts is something that is, you know, a practice that has been around for hundreds of years, typically done by women, pieces that are passed down through families. This is a vintage tablecloth that I appliqued these natural dye paintings onto to make this piece. So I was really thinking about the legacy that we are passing down to as Americans, and the legacy that our grandparents passed down to us, and the in the form of climate change and American infrastructure, the permanence, but also impermanence of American infrastructure, something that I think we're seeing all over the country today as natural disasters are becoming increasingly happening, and also the severity is increasing. In New York City over the past couple of years, we've kind of witnessed every fall, August and September, the late summer, our infrastructure totally crumbling around us as these tropical storms that the city never had up until about 5 years ago are just dumping feet of water on us. And the subways are kind of crumbling. And when we were driving in this photo, so this picture over here in the bottom corner is from the Lake Charles area in Western Louisiana. There's a bridge there that is shut down now because it is in total disrepair. And every year the politicians are saying, this year, if you elect me, I'll fix the Lake Charles Bridge. But they just keep holding it over everyone's heads. And it's kind of the same in New York City as well. And so I think it's really interesting for me to think about the legacy that we are passing on through infrastructure and our kind of inherited state of the world. So I was also thinking about that as I made this new fabric book. This is a fabric book that I made here at Alchemy. All of these, all of the base fabrics were dyed here. We've been utilizing flowers from Mama Bird Farm, which is an awesome local farm. And Mara grew a bunch of flowers for Katie, and Katie's been sharing those with me. So all of these pieces of fabric were dyed with marigolds and coreopsis from Mara's farm. And all of these photos were my original 35mm photos that I printed with cyanotypes, and then I've been experimenting with toning the cyanotypes using different natural dyes as well. So this book is called Looking into the Eyes of a God. I was thinking about, again, highways, interstates, and the modern day religion that is driving in America. So most of these photos were taken in and around the area of Interstate 10, which runs from Jacksonville, Florida to Los Angeles. And we drove on a huge portion of Interstate 10 on our journey, and it just felt like it was a really big part of that. So again, I'm really fascinated by these structures, these cathedral-like towers of these highway pylons that are holding up everything around us. I mean, we can even think of it on another level as trucking, right? Like all goods are traveling across America on these highways. They truly are the lifeblood And I'm kind of in awe by their structures. It's truly cathedral-like to me, to stand underneath these overpasses, and see these highways go by. Especially like these were taken while we were driving down the streets. This photo here, the blue cyanotype, the upper blue cyanotype is actually the same image that inspired this portion, the singular pylon. It's kind of zooming in and taking that singular pylon and the image of the ramp traveling over it. So I really do see all of these pieces as being really interconnected as well. And again, so this is some more of my 35mm photos with toned cyanotypes. These cyanotypes were toned with black tea and green tea. I really love the way that it pulls out different hues. And I feel like you get a kind of different sense. These blue ones are kind of startling and shocking to me, but I think you get a different kind of sense with the more muted tones of these toned cyanotypes. Yeah. And this fabric here was dyed with marigolds. And again, so these photos are of a really interesting place where me and my partner camped for a couple of days outside of Louisiana, or out in Louisiana, outside of New Orleans, right off of Interstate 10. It's a little town called Norco, and Norco is basically a company town. It's a refinery. It refines a lot of the crude oil that comes into the port in New Orleans, that is then shipped all over the country, so that we can continue to drive our cars and pray to our gods of the interstate. This is an image of sort of the silhouetted view of Norco right across the street from the massive refinery plant. There's a campground, and it's beautiful. And there's these massive oaks covered in Spanish moss that you can see in the bottom photo. So there's kind of a juxtaposition there of the like harsh brutality and reality of the refinery plant that is creating the thing that we are all living on, this oil, versus the trees and the water and the natural beauty of the bayou. This is another book that I have created. I'm really interested in like these themes of like Americana, whether that pertains to the highways or just to these kind of images. So I made this book also while in residency here at Alchemy. This was kind of a book that I made along with my students in the soft bookmaking class. So this is all eco-printed fabric that I made while I was here. And then I used the cut paper stencil Peshawar printmaking technique to make these images. The book is called How to Disappear. And it's kind of about the idea of, well, it's very much about leaving New York City, going on this journey, finding myself in the desert, finding myself in this kind of like old west town. The town we were in is called Terlingua, and it is quite literally also called the Terlingua ghost town. It was an old mining town, and then for years, it was pretty much just like nothing was there besides a couple really scrappy locals. And now it's kind of been built up into a little bit more of a town. There's still not much there. There's like 3 restaurants, but it's serving this national park that's right next to it. Oh, wow, I've talked a lot. 5 minutes. All right, so let me go through this quickly. So I also did some cyanotypes with text. I'm kind of really into the idea of text that's kind of hard to read. Like, I don't really want people to stand there and read the whole book. So I'm kind of really into text that's kind of hard to read. I drew on imagery from this ghost town, Interlingua. These are some of the awesome students that I've been able to work with while here at Alchemy. These are some of my students from the youth mentorship, from Soft Book Expression, and from the Arts Fest. The other night we did a tiny zine making activity. So all of these people are channeling their inner bookmaker, their inner quilter, their inner fiber artist, their inner dyer. And I think that that was really beautiful to see.
Like crazy picture of Bohio. That's right.
I feel like he looks happy.
Yeah.
But yeah, so these are some of my students from my youth mentorship. You can see in the bottom 2 photos, they dyed and cyanotyped fabric and then printed on it. And now in our final session this upcoming Wednesday, I'm going to try to get them to all put those pieces together into soft books.
Yeah.
Yeah. And and I'm also right now working on just a series of smaller quilts using scraps of fabric from my 2 soft book projects that I made while here. And you can find more of my work on Instagram at Total Dive.
At Total Dive.
And I guess I will open the floor up to any questions.
I love it. I have a comment.
How did you attach gold leaf to the costume?
I had that question.
That was actually, yeah, that was a process of trial and error. That was kind of also what my job was as a costume crafts artisan. I'm gonna go back and find the picture. That was part of my job as a costume crafts artisan. Was the costume we worked really closely with the costume designers. I would say, other than like the head drapers, we were the people in the costume shop that worked the closest with the costume designers. They would come to us with ideas and we would figure out ways to execute them. I honestly really don't even remember exactly how I did that. I remember that there was a series of tests with different scraps of fabric and different types of glue, seeing what would work best to get the gold leaf to stick to the fabric. And we nailed something down. This was a very delicate gown. This was like, she only wore it for one scene and it was like never meant to be like washed or anything like that, because that gold leaf was kind of a little on the edge. This was for a play called Plays for the Plague Year, which was a play that was written by a playwright that worked very closely with the public. It was about COVID, yeah. Yeah, but it was a cool project to get to work on. It kind of combined these. It was kind of similar to your work, Maren, in that it combined these. It was very realistic, but then had these veins of fantasy running through it. So like everyone was dressed kind of like in plain clothes, and then there were like certain characters that would come out certain times wearing these fantastical garments. Maria?
I have a question, I think, that's like not about, it's like, move your screen back forward. Okay, thanks. I just find this area here is like, I find it really interesting how your content is so, kind of industrial contemporary life, like focused, and your materials that you're using are like really traditional. And that seems sort of like a rare combination. Like a lot of times people use you know, the world of materials around botanical dye and the world of symbols and artistic content is usually different than highway pine line. And I that's like a really compelling thing about your artwork. And I'm wondering if that, the way that you've talked about highway pylons is that they're like using like religious language and sort of like impressive language. And I'm wondering if you just like stumbled into this like content and aesthetic because you're just interested in them, or if that juxtaposition is like what intrigued you to be making these things. Is that question?
Yeah, it actually very much is. That juxtaposition definitely intrigued me to be making these things. Like I have specifically thought before about combining industrial things and soft traditional feminine sort of things. Like my Iron Acorn book was kind of maybe my like first like foray into that like way of thinking, where I very much was like, okay, these are like washers that I just like found on the street in New York, and like here's like a rusty chain, and like here's these acorns that fell from like a tree outside of somebody's like massive apartment building, but like I can like use these things to like make like a small like intimate like vision of something. And this very much like was like kind of intentional with this as well, to make these like brutalist images into something that is like a family heirloom, like soft traditional thing, to be kind of like viewed in that way. So yeah, it is kind of intentional. And I think it is also kind of not intentional too, in the same way that when we come to things that draw us, I think there's sort of maybe this growing sense of like, oh wait, yeah, like these two things are kind of coming together in this way. Like you don't necessarily always like just wake up one morning being like, it's industrial and it's soft and fabric. Like you kind of over the course of like months or even years of creating a practice, you're kind of like, okay, yeah, it's this industrial soft thing. It's like a city girl, but I also like want to go be a little rat in the woods. Like it's this combination of all of these things coming together. So yeah, it very much is. It is intentional to the point that I think any art is intentional, you know. Like I think also, and like me and you have talked about this too, about just kind of like creating and then taking a step back and being like, okay, so what does what I just created like really mean? You know, but I think, yeah, but like as a visual artist, like a lot of times that urge to create just kind of comes first. Yeah. Okay, Dad?
We have a little comment and then a question. The comment is that one thing that's really inspiring me in your work is the some of the eco prints have like this kind of photographic quality to them that like you wouldn't notice if they're on a garment, but when they're in a soft book and it's just like just the
Totally.
page, it looks like abstract photography to me, and it has some of the same like textural qualities that like film photography has. And
Yeah.
so I think it's really cool that you're like working in film too, and also like finding ways to incorporate those photographs into the books with the natural dye. There's like some, I don't know, it's like I mean, eco prints can be like kind of photographic, and I just feel like you're like combining that in a way that's really cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, like this.
Yeah, I feel like
You
this
know?
specifically.
Yeah, there was one earlier. Actually, the
I also feel
iron
like the
one.
cover of this book too, like
Yeah.
the way that this leaf left this imprint, and that's really like, and you're an eco printer too, so you know about this, like when you use like iron to create your like a resist shape, it oftentimes will kind of leave like a dark outline around the edge of things, and I think then you do kind of have this like photographic quality to it.
Yeah, there's some like photographic components that are really interesting. That's really cool, and I think the book is helping that like really shine. And then my second thing is a question, which is about go back to the cyanotype one. The first cyanotype one.
This one? Yeah.
Okay. Are these the same? Did you
These are
invert?
inverts of each other.
Okay.
Yeah. So as I was so this book was my first time working with cyanotypes and with tone cyanotypes. This was like a totally new thing to me, which was really cool, and something that I really like will always cherish so much about alchemy. Is that I was just like, let me learn all this new stuff right now. And it's been really, really awesome. And so yeah, as I was experimenting and like figuring out like how do these images print best with cyanotype, and what materials do I want to tone all of these things with, like what does the toning process look better with, I ended up printing out for pretty much all of these images, like these are also inverses of each other. I ended up printing out inverses of the negatives, like black and white, for all of these images. And then I was really just like compelled by that in and of itself too. I mean, again, like I think with this book, I was just trying to kind of create like this little world that you could look at, and this way to just kind of like have this little like moment of intimacy with these highway pylons, which is kind of the exact opposite of what a highway pylon is meant to be. There's something very unintimate. There's something very cold and harsh about highways and about these structures. So I think it's interesting to make that into like an intimate experience. And I feel like being able to see the inverse and the like verse, being able to see both images of these pylons is really interesting. And that's a lot of my work too is also just very guided by the materials that I'm choosing to work with. That's something I've been telling all of my students. Is like, it's not going to be this perfect thing because it's going to be influenced by the material. It's going to be influenced by the process. We're working with natural dyes here. It's not always going to come out exactly the way you want it to come out. Things might come out a little bit different than what you're expecting. And so as I'm working through the process of like creating, like, what is this going to look like? Then I find myself being inspired by like, whoa, I like seeing the pylon with the pylons being white, and I like seeing the pylon with the pylons being black. And then I'm like, let me include all of that. So yeah, this was an inverse. And this is the one above is not an inverse. That's the same image for both. But this one, these are the true Prussian blues of the cyanotype. And then this one on the bottom was toned with green tea, and the one on the top was toned with black tea.
Wow. Cool.
Cool.
I have a question on the Zoom if there's nobody asking a question in person.
Question. Yeah, who's just speak?
Hi, it's Shiloh. I miss you. I love you. My question, you kind of already answered this a little bit earlier, but I was curious. I've noticed more in your recent work, especially within the last year, that you have been moving more towards direct representation with images rather than just images that are like kind of purely the byproducts of the materials that you use. And I'm curious what has led you towards this type of representation. Like what has led you towards like photographic representation and these illustrations like in this book as well?
Wow, great question. And that's so real. And you're literally pointing something out that I hadn't even realized until you said this just now. So thank you. Like I have totally moved. Like so Shiloh and I were residents together last summer at Pillow Fort. So Shiloh was there when I was creating the Kneeling, Rinsing, Dreaming book, which was the eco-printed book from earlier that really is just about different techniques and different textures. And honestly, you're pointing out something that I hadn't even realized. So I feel like the best answer that I have right now, this is something that I've said to my students multiple times, especially the younger students, is that once you know the rules, then you can kind of start breaking the rules. And I think like as myself kind of creating the medium, like there are other artists that I'm not trying to be like, I invented fabric books now. Like Louise Bourgeois probably invented fabric books. But like I didn't draw directly from anyone else in the making of this book. It was kind of just like an internal thing that started happening. So I think when I first was making all of these books for the past couple of years, it has been this thing of like almost like creating a rule book for myself. And that rule book just was all about different dye techniques, different sewing techniques, different quilting techniques, different embroidery techniques, and then also experimenting with different bindings too. Like the book from Pillow Fort was like an accordion fold style binding that I had never tried to do before. And yeah, I feel like now that I'm kind of like, especially now I'm teaching this to other folks and I feel like I'm more in control of the medium. I think now I'm like, okay, now I really actually have something to say. Other than just like making something that's really beautiful. I think now I'm like, actually, I have something to say. I have something to say about Americana, and I have something to say about climate change, and I have something to say about my own journey and my own self as well. So thank you, Shiloh.
Amazing. Thank you, Sophie.
Hi, Sophie.
Hello.
We love you.
Just wanted to say hi.
Is this Rowan and Ivy?
Yeah.
Yes, we
Oh my
don't have
God,
a
love
question.
you guys.
Great presentation.
We don't have
Rowan
a
is at
question.
Rowan I met down in West Texas.
Viva Terlingua.
Viva tu lingua, for real. Oh,
Yay!
awesome. All right. Should I just exit out of this? I'll let Glenn take over. Wow.
Yeah.
That was incredible.
Also, I never knew my religion and now I do.
It's
Driving.
Thanks so much to everybody who came out to this final artist talk of the season. Thanks to all the Zoom people. It was really nice to have you all here virtually and in real life. And yeah, so these amazing artists have an art show coming up as well. Is that Thursday?
Yeah.
Okay, Thursday at 6,
Yeah.
7, 6?
6 to 8. And Emerald.
And Emerald. Wait, that's Wednesday. Emerald's is Wednesday. Oh, but
No,
you're
Emerald is
visual
also
arts
an
on
art
Thursday.
show,
Oh my
yeah.
God, it's spanning the worlds. Okay, so we've got 3 artists from 6 to 8 in the Alchemy Art Center Dome. That doesn't apply to most of the Zoom people, but
Right?
Yeah.
and the mentees. Okay, cool. I'm just learning about this all right now. So everybody should come to the Dome at 6 p.m. on Thursday. It'll be excellent to see you. And yeah, thanks so much for attending this artist talk, and we'll see you also. Oh, the one last thing I wanted to say is that this recording will be available on YouTube, on our YouTube channel in like a week or so. And I'll let you guys know, and you can tell all your friends who weren't able to make it or anybody who wants to see it again. Okay, thanks everyone.
Yay.